Then wheels. Wheels, 2 millimeters axial, 2 millimeters radial is acceptable run out. Then up and down, side to side. That sounds like a lot, but you don't in the service manual and they'll tell you that's what's acceptable. If you can see your wheel is wobbling, that's a good, you need to have it repaired. There are companies that can straighten wheels, and there are several, and you can find them through chat groups on the internet. Dings, anything weird that's keeping your wheel from being perfectly round, got to get it fixed. It's just not worth it, because then you'll be chasing, why does my bike do this in this turn? Why does my bike act like that? It just doesn't make any sense. So wheels got to be straight. Brakes, pulsing in the lever. Anybody feels any kind of pulsing? This is an issue, with rotors. I strongly encourage you, when you have however you trailer your bike, to make sure whatever fixture you put your front wheel in has a curved nature to it. If you use like those cheesy wire things like Lockhart sells, right? When you go to pull on your bike, your rotor will come by and push on that bar, and it'll bend the rotor, right? So I can't tell you how many times you see a guy walking through the pit with his front wheel looking for rotors, going, oh my God, I'm not going to make my race because I bent my rotors in the trailer. Real danger behind a bent rotor is obviously as the wheel's going, it's going like this. It spreads your pads open. You come to the turn, you pull the brake, the bike keeps on going, and the rest is, you can imagine. So make sure whatever you're doing there has that set up. The primary check I make with the brakes is I grab the lever and I pull it really hard and just hold it for a minute. And then I walk by and look at all the fittings, right? I want to make sure there's nothing weeping out of any of the fittings at the master cylinder or down by either caliper or at either end of any of the hoses, right? Just that constant pressure there, will help. If it's going to leak at all, you'll find it, right? And if it does, you need to find the reason, if it's a crush washer or whatever the reason might be, and fix it, right? Same thing down at the caliper. If the crush washers are leaking, they'll be spraying fluid all over your, back towards your tire and your rim. Another high sign you'll look for can be little spatters of brake fluid up under your windscreen. A lot of people overfill their reservoir, and that's one sign, one symptom of it. But if this crush washers are leaking, you'll get these little tiny spatters here, right? So very important not to overfill the reservoir, because that can make the brake system lock up, right? So simple words on brakes. Chain and sprockets. Chain and sprockets, most screwed up thing on any bike in the paddock. All the time we find it. 99% of people have their chain too tight. Chain needs to be loose. Now when you grab your chain and move it, right, and your manual says, I'm supposed to have, half an inch of free play. That doesn't mean you push and pull on the chain to make it deflect a half an inch. It should rattle, right? You should be able to grab with fingertip pressure and do it. First thing I do when anybody brings me their bike, I'm just standing there, I kick the chain, because if the chain's tight, I can't push on, it'll be useless for me to push on the bike, right? Now, tight chains do many bad things, right? Tight chain will pull on the countershaft of the transmission, the front sprocket, right? Now, because as your suspension is moving, right, this is your swing arm. You got your chain going around here, right? As your swing arm moves up, right, the distance between the rear axle and the countershaft becomes greater, right? When these all line up, that distance there is greater than that distance there. So the chain tightens as the suspension compresses. So if it starts out kind of snug when the bike is neutral, when you get on the track and squat the bike down, it's going to really be pulling on it. Now when it pulls on this countershaft, it'll make the bike slow down. First of all, it's like putting the brakes on, but it's loading the countershaft's bearing, it's loading the countershaft seal, right? It's stretching the chain and burying it into the sprockets. It's like grinding it into the sprockets. It'll just destroy the chain and sprockets. Chain and sprockets end up with tight spots in them, and so whenever you're checking your chain, you need to feel its tension and then rotate the wheel, 6-8 inches at a time, and keep feeling it, because you'll end up with tight spots in it. And what the tight spot is going to make the bike surge as it leaves the turn, right? So you'll get a leaving the turn, right? So very important to make sure that the chain has no tight spots. If it does, you're going to have to replace the chain and sprockets. Best to replace them as a set. Let me show you another way to check to inspect the chain so you can find out if it's worn out. All right. All right, so let me make a drawing real quick and show you a simplest way to inspect your chain and sprockets and see if to inspect them for their wear. When you have your chain and sprockets, you know, you want to push obviously roughly in the center of the chain here to check for slack. But if you want to know just how worn the chain is, what you need to do is pull on it in this area. If you walk up to the back of the bike and grab the chain and pull on it from the sprocket, it really won't matter how tight or loose this is. If the chain lifts away from the sprocket, then you have some wear, right? Now, pretty much any chain, brand new, they'll barely move at all. You know, once they've been broken in, it'll lift a little bit, right? So no big worries. But if you can lift the chain and you can see effectively through you can see a divot, you know, see the bottom of a tooth, then you need to seriously consider replacing the whole operation there. Now, in a race environment, people are constantly changing chain and sprockets, you know, to get proper gearing, right? Particularly rear sprockets. The main thing is to make sure no tight spots. Because if you get a sprocket that ends up giving you one of those tight spots like I was describing, it'll wreck your nice chain. Chain's 120 bucks, you know, sprocket's 40. Throw the sprocket out, you know, get another sprocket, right? Typically it's the chain that's giving you the hassle though, so you got to try and determine where the problem's coming from. If you're a track days rider and for the most part you just run with one set of gearing, replace it all as a set, you know, chain and sprockets all as a set. Highly recommend you do it. If you ever replace your chain and sprockets, go to 520. Most chain and sprockets, most people will. And really the reason for that is when you go to the track, nobody's going to have a 525 or a 530 or a 532 sprocket. You know, if you want to try a different gearing combination, nobody's going to have it. So try and get, you know, do your 520 conversion. A lot of people say, oh, well, I'm just going to grab just get the rear. You know, I'll get a 530 rear, and, you know, next time I'll get the 520. You know, you're just flushing good money after bad. So try and save up and do that as a set, you know, with the 520 stuff. So anyway, you can actually, to demonstrate, you can put the chain as tight as you want, go back there and still lift the, you know, pull the chain away, and then that's a real good indicator of your wear. Now, if you're not sure what's too tight and what's loose, right? Find the biggest guy standing around you in the immediate area, have him get up on the bike, sit on it backwards. You can reach around, grab the rim, and bear hug the bike, right? And you can squish it down as if it would be simulated loaded on the track. Even when the suspension is loaded, you want to make sure it still has free play, and I mean, you know, like fingertip pressure, the chain should move, right? Not you know, there's my free play, right? So make sure that thing is loose. Now, second thing that happens as the chain tightens up, if you got it set too tight, as the chain tightens up, the shock quits working, right? Because basically it's locked up in the back there now. So, you know, it doesn't matter if you've bought an $1,150, you know, super double throwdown shock, right? It ain't working because the chain is stopping it from happening. So, very, very important to keep that thing loose. To exaggerate this, you'll see it more often with dirt bike riders because dirt bikes have really loose chains, right? Because they move a huge range, right? They even are so loose the chain would just fall off. That's why they have a guide that hangs from the lower swing arm, right? If you've ever seen on a dirt bike, that big plastic doohickey down here, right? That's guiding the chain into this because it would just fly off. They're so loose, right? But guys don't know any better. They'll come home and go, oh, my chain's loose, you know, and tighten her all up, and they go out and go over a jump. It'll literally pull the transmission shaft out of the motor. I've only ever seen this happen one time on a street bike, and some poor guy had a brand new Katana. It didn't have 500 miles on it, and that chain's loose, and he cranked it up tight and literally ripped the counter shaft of the transmission out of the engine cases, right? Bike with 450 miles on it, demolished, right? And so that's obviously the exaggeration. You're much likely to more have, you know, tear up your chain and sprockets and really damage this bearing, you know, the ball bearing behind there. So yeah, that's one of those things where hopefully he didn't have enough money to buy another bike because he wasn't smart enough to ride it in the first place. So